Let's move on to the next topic, the next deep dive. Let's go to Lauren. Lauren is joining us from 3Box Labs, and we'll be talking about how to use ceramic for dynamic data. Welcome, Lauren.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me here. I'm Lauren Feld from 3Box Labs, and I cover all things growth for 3Box Labs. We're the core team behind Ceramic Network. So really good to see some faces. I know I've met a couple of you guys already and excited to share more about Ceramic with the rest of you. So yeah, why are we here presenting to you guys? So if you are familiar with Ceramic before, you might be familiar with us as a decentralized data protocol. And I'm excited to be here today to share a little bit more about some upcoming releases that we're working on, which are basically moving Ceramic to be more of a decentralized graph database system. And the reason that it's relevant to the IPFS community is because Ceramic is built on top of IPFS. And really what we found when we started working with IPFS ourselves was that it's really great for these immutable data use cases. But when you have use cases where you're actually doing more dynamic data, where you need to mutate and update data repeatedly over time, it can be really difficult as a developer to keep track of all of those changes, because every time you update a data object in IPLD, your content identifier changes. So that's why we really think about Ceramic as tooling for the IPFS ecosystem for projects that have these needs for more mutable and dynamic data. So this kind of picture here can maybe help to crystallize Ceramic a little bit more. And the way that data works on Ceramic is that we have streams of dynamic data. And a stream is basically a log of different commits, which are stored in IPFS, and each commit is an IPLD object. But a stream, unlike a content identifier, has a persistent stream ID that makes it really easy to reference that data object over time. And as a developer, if I want to call a stream by their stream ID, I will just fetch the latest state of that data object, but still have this kind of canonical record of all previous changes and updates that have happened over time. As we move towards this more graph-like database system, one of the key features that our team has been hard at work on is really adding indexing to Ceramic, which is obviously a very important part of the network. How do you actually find and query information and data? So we're now going to be able to index data via this GraphQL interface, a really seamless and easy developer experience. So all Ceramic nodes have always been kind of paired and wrapped with an IPFS node, and now it will also be backed by a database, SQL, SQLite, Postgres database, whatever you choose, which will basically index and organize that data for you locally. And you basically have a local state. So unlike other traditional blockchains where you have to have this shared global consensus, on Ceramic, it's local first. So it makes Ceramic really scalable long-term as a data network. So the next piece I'll just talk about is really like the key unlock of why we are so excited about Ceramic and really our kind of competitive differentiation. And that's really about these reusable data models. And really this goal of having an open data layer is actually making data composable across different ecosystems. So on the right is kind of a quick overview of the Ceramic stack. At the base, we have the stream availability layer. That's basically the peer-to-peer data network. On top, I just mentioned indexing. And then the highest level is really this tooling around it. And that's really referring to these models. So all data that's stored on Ceramic and streams are defined by models, which basically are schema that define the shape that the data is taking as it's stored on the network. So you can think about a schema as, let's say, a basic profile schema. That says for your profile, I want you to store an avatar and your name and your email, whatever it is. And as an application developer, you will basically take a bunch of different models and create a composite that's specific to your application. So if I'm doing a Web3 social application, I might have a profile model, I might have some comments models, maybe some likes. And what's really exciting about this is that all of these models are able to be reused and remixed across different applications. So data is composable across the entire ecosystem. And so we're building out some really great tooling as well with this next release to make models easily discoverable and longer term creating incentives to encourage reuse of those models across the ecosystem, which is really exciting. So I want to spend the next couple of minutes just talking about the use cases. How are people using Ceramic today? What are we excited about? And really with an eye of like, if you're listening and you're looking for this kind of solutions, I want everyone here to be able to be equipped to kind of understand like how is Ceramic being used in the ecosystem and what is it best at? So being this open data layer, as I'm sure you guys can kind of relate to, being this also an open kind of data protocol, there's a lot of different use cases for Ceramic, but I wanted to highlight two where we're seeing a lot of traction today. And so the first is now around reputation and credentials. So this can be anything from thinking about decentralized user profiles. So DAO House, Metagame are creating decentralized user profiles on Ceramic. Social verification. So maybe I want to actually link myself to a Twitter, GitHub, or another Web2 social account. Maybe it's a skill that I've earned through completing a bounty or a quest on Rabbit Hole or a membership of an organization I'm in. Maybe it's a KYC proof or a proof of humanity to show that I'm not a bot spamming the network. all these kind of credentials, instead of living on chain, which is expensive, costly, and not very scalable, can live on Ceramic and then be self-sovereign by the user and composable across applications. The other big use case is user-generated content. So this can be anything from comments, likes on comments, blog posts. We're also seeing a lot of DAO tooling projects use Ceramic to store proposals or even votes as well, which is super interesting. So I'll deep dive into a couple more specific use cases, more kind of from a vertical perspective. So I mentioned DAOs. We're seeing a lot of DAO tooling projects adopt Ceramic and go live, which is super exciting. So the first, as I mentioned, trustless operations, right? A lot of DAOs, the whole ethos is to build these fully open and decentralized communities, but they're still relying on these centralized applications that kind of own like all of the thought leadership and IP for these communities. So Boardroom, for example, has been using Ceramic to store proposals for these DAOs. We've also seen people do likes or even off-chain voting. So JPEG Protocol is working on this, or even discussions. So there's a platform called Orbis that's basically building a Web3-like discourse on Ceramic. The other is DAO controlled data. So I didn't mention this before, but all streams on Ceramic are controlled by these decentralized identifiers. And we've actually created a really cool DID method called a safe DID, which allows a multi-signature wallet to be able to write and author data on Ceramic. So Radical, which you might be familiar, is basically a decentralized GitHub. They're using it so that you can have multiple people basically control and author the about page of an organization. So you don't just have one person being the authority of how you kind of promote and share yourself externally. So those org profiles is a really interesting use case. And the last thing is just going back to adding more reputation and context around these like hex string wallet addresses. If you're going to open or participate in these open communities and collaborate, we need to understand a lot more about who is actively participating beyond just this wallet address. So Gitcoin, for example, just went live with Ceramic in their Gitcoin grants round 14 that went live in June. And they basically are storing these proof of personhood credentials on Ceramic so they can be sure that one vote is equivalent to one person and not just a bunch of bots spamming their network. So super excited about that use case. Next thing I'll go to is NFTs. I know this is obviously a big focus for the IPFS community as well and protocol labs more generally. We've had some conversations with the NFT.storage and then love what they're doing. There's a lot of synergies there. So one thing is just having more dynamic NFT experiences. GeoWeb is a project that's doing kind of like a metaverse project, and they're basically using Ceramic so that they can store different land parcels or different estates, such as like a house as an NFT. And that way, whoever purchases or as that ownership kind of changes hands, they can actually mutate what that street or house looks like. You can also see the same kind of evolution of this data with metadata more generally. So it doesn't just have to be the JPEG itself, but metadata around the NFT. So a project called Fungi Proof is doing this. They basically do audits that grade different NFTs based on the technical soundness and quality of the NFTs and continuously reissue these kind of quality scores to NFTs over time. Obviously, if you do that on chain, very costly and difficult to do. So Ceramic is much better option there for those kind of use cases. Last thing, social participation. So how can we actually start to get more of a sense if I go to an NFT marketplace, seeing what are my friends buying or influential people in the space? If I could basically start to have more of like a curated news feed for me and what I'm interested in. CyberConnect is building this decentralized social graph infrastructure on Ceramic for follow lists, news feeds, et cetera. And the last thing I'll just kind of touch on to wrap up here is DeFi. So some really cool use cases here. One is just thinking about more like user controlled storage and settings. So a big one here is either a token watch list, or you can think about address books. So I mentioned before, sending money across the ethers to this random wallet address can be kind of disconcerting. I'm sure we've all had that experience. We're seeing some projects like Superfluid working to basically create these human readable address books and storing that data on Ceramic. Xerion and some other DeFi apps want to make trading more social. So again, can I see the portfolio of heavily influential investors in the space or my friends comment and kind of interact with their trades? That's a great use case. Last thing, Coinbase has been working on as well, creating this KYC utility where they can basically publish KYC attestations in this open data layer. So now other DeFi applications can leverage that credential instead of doing the heavy lifting themselves to KYC all their users if they so choose. So lots of different use cases, super exciting and very cool to see us working with projects all across the ecosystem. My last plug is come build with us. We would love to meet you. If you want to learn more, go to developers.ceramic.network. The graph release, like I mentioned, is coming in the next couple of weeks. So a lot more exciting info to share there. Follow us on Twitter, but definitely hop in our Discord. That's where our whole team is. And if you want to chat with me, definitely shoot me an email. And yeah, if you hear of any projects that are, struggling and thinking about opportunities and tooling for more dynamic data use cases, please send them our way. We would love to chat.
Wow, very cool. I love the use cases you're working on. This is definitely very, very much compatible with what we're going after here when it comes to the use cases in the markets we're trying to go address. Thank you so much for joining, Lauren. Appreciate it.